connected to the internet. There is no transparency of how the voter information is processed, moved, and stored. And as a matter of fact, these companies have to allow any type of inspection into their code, and they always decry that, you know, it's our IP, it's IP protection. But with declaration, I believe, with Jay Johnson, was our Secretary of Homeland Security, he declared that the national election system was national critical infrastructure. So there is, you know, I think, reason for us to understand the code and how these machines function and how they use our votes and process our votes. The voting record is able to be modified, deleted, adjusted by administrators or outside threats, and those are also explained in the user manual. Operators can assign votes for write-in votes, blank or error ballots, enlarge number. All of these votes that can get put in a batch file, and then the administrator of that voting or tabulation system can say, okay, there's 8,000 votes in the ballot, or 5,000 votes in this batch file, and they can say, well, I think batch, we'll just make this go to this candidate, and they have that they have that authority in the user manual to do that. Our team is not the only team that's working on this. There are literally hundreds of other small cyber teams that have weighed in on this. There are tons of statisticians. Some you'll hear from some of your Arizona citizens today. Several states looking at these anomalies. But it's not a secret. I mean, DEF CON last year, I think the hacking teams broke in and manipulated these machines in under 2 minutes. So it can be done, it's easy, and they're very low security. So they can be hacked to manipulate votes. One of the hackers discovered a malware on the server. It's called the Q-Snatch. That basically records login credentials and passwords. So if someone in Philadelphia, or someone in Maricopa County, or someone in Antrim, Michigan logged in, that malware will grab their username and password. And so you can log in. If you got access to the backside of that malware, you can log in wherever you are in the world to Maricopa County to manipulate. So there's multiple ways.
Interrupt for a second, so we get the point of this clear. You actually examined one of the machines. You were actually able to see very, very clear changes in vote in the machine, correct?
Correct, in Michigan.
And it was down ballot changes. How many?
Correct. So the down ballot was for there were changes in the election day vote on 11/3 to the recount vote on 11/6. Say for example, the school board, one lady on the election day received 519 votes, and this was a very small precinct. In the post recount, they went from 592 to 852. The total votes went from 1068 to 1810. The write-in vote jumped from 24 to 112. There was another proposition on a state proposal that jumped significantly from 700 votes on election day up to 1083 on the recount. So there are a lot of variabilities, and what we believe this is due to is the USB drive that was used in the election day versus the post-election recount.
Well, this proposition, when I see, I think we should give them a copy of this, make this available to them, because it shows on the day of the election, this is a proposition about the use of future revenues generated from oil and gas bonuses. And I take it was fairly controversial. First vote was 774, 508 against. The second vote was 1083 for and 206 against. Quite a difference. Now, how do you accomplish that difference? How does the machine change? After the votes are cast, What does the machine remember other votes?
So there's a card that stores the votes, and it's run against the algorithm that's put on the USB card into the actual machine in the tabulator. And that difference was basically the tabulation algorithm.
Why, excuse me for my ignorance, but why would you put an algorithm in if you have a vote that's 774 to 508?
That's a,
Why wouldn't you just look and see, was that the correct vote? Why do you put an algorithm in, which is introducing an outside force to what should be an internal process?
to shift things how you like them. When you look at moving these algorithms around through the different precincts, you can achieve quite a number of aggregate ballot shifts. So this was one instance and one recount and one small.
So when they looked at the machine on election day, it was 774 to 508. When they looked at it again on the recount 3 days later, it was 1,083 to 206. Is that right? And that happens because of an algorithm, not because anybody changed their vote.
The elections clerk did write an affidavit, and they basically said that we followed all the procedures on election day, that was a recount, and these were the results that the election clerk.
We're also going to submit this study. It's quite complicated. I fell asleep last night reading it and had dreams about internet surveillance and all kinds of things. I propose getting an expert to it, but it shows exactly what the Colonel is saying. That these machines should be machines because anybody can communicate. It's like having an open computer. Anybody can communicate with them and do whatever they want with them. So we'll submit this and this to you, that they can be changed, that they were changed, then exactly how you can do it. Now, we know we're not saying it about any of the machines in Maricopa County. The machines in Maricopa County, nor has it being submitted to dispute the lies that Dominion and Smartmatic putting out, which is their machines are perfect, their machines can't be tampered with, their machines are tamper-proof. The reality is their machines are just the opposite. They're completely vulnerable. Is that right?
If you look up on the screen, that's exactly what. Let me see if I can. Do I need to put this at full screen, or is it better?
I think you need to explain it.
So this is a spider foot reconnaissance tool that looked at DominionVoting.com network that was analyzed on, and basically this shows vulnerabilities. It shows volumetric internet traffic raw data. It shows all of the web server's physical coordinates, all the vulnerabilities that are associated with the server. Basically, it does show that this was connected to the internet on voting day, and the volume of traffic was significant, and the vulnerabilities there were plenty of vulnerabilities that hackers could penetrate.
Can you tell something?
We did observe that were going from the U.S. We don't know if it was specifically Dominion traffic going, but to a server in Frankfurt.
Frankfurt, Germany.
Excuse me.
And who has it?
Colonel Waldron, could you just take a moment and hack that traffic? Because probably a lot of folks have been burned, not sure what that is.
So it's bits of information that are sent over the internet from internet protocol.
Thank you.
What's in Frankfurt, Germany?
Well, we looked prior to our white hat hackers and found that there was traffic at a Seidel server. Seidel is one of the companies, and I can show you we mentioned before the interconnectedness. The interconnectedness of these So this is sort of a historical link to all the voting companies, and we got smart in the middle to Dominion voting systems. Side night reporting through SOE software and clarity elections over here. If you click up on the and Secretary of State voting system as property of clarity elections. So it doesn't really belong to you, it really belongs to clarity elections.
So, simple. A Dominion machine vote is susceptible to easily having that vote changed.
By an authorized user.
By an authorized or
Correct. That's a hacker. A hacker.
a hacker. So my is only as good as integrity of Dominion and all the hackers that exist that can get into the Dominion machine.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo.
Pardon me, say that one more time.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Can you think of anyone would hire them to count votes in the United States?
I can postulate.
Or any of the good reasons?
They have a strong lobby. They work with state government agencies. They've got the interest to sell their service.
Can you now look at, in Arizona, the analysis you did Arizona?
We noticed a difference in Arizona versus the other. Our team mostly focused on voice analysis, which were an electronic inject, a lot of votes, and where the notes were injected in a specific time period exceeded the process ballots. And it's a signal of an anomaly where we would want to go in and do forensic on the ballots that were processed. Votes 2000, and then I'm ready to process the batch file. In the user's manual, there's ways that it can vote that batch, at an 80%, 20%, 100%. However, the administrator chooses, and that basically to allow them to move votes through the system. So Arizona was a little bit different. A pretty strong rise right up at the front, the first part of voting day, whereas the others, and I can show you those, have a gradual increase in votes. And this may the fact that Arizona allowed early counting and tabulation, so those batch files go right away. But this injection spike at 8:06:40 p.m. This is adjusted from Zulu time. So this is 143,000 votes. That was in excess of what the machines could have processed. The real reason that we believe that this spike was a little bit of an anomaly, and should I show the email that was sent to the Arizona?
Enforcer.
Yes. And that was sent to DOJ. This individual sent the email, wanted to remain anonymous, but had enough, they sent this to the criminal division of justice. He did not want to be included in the investigation, but the information that they reported was what we would like the opportunity to investigate on your behalf, or a forensics team of your choosing. It doesn't matter to us, but it says that please be advised that Pima County Recorder, located at 240 North Stone Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, in Pima County, Arizona, and the Democratic Party added fraud votes in the initial count to the vote by mail totals released at 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. So this coincides with what we observed in the data analytics at that spike. We weren't aware of this until this email, until after the fact. So there were approximately 35,000 fraud votes at each Democratic candidate's vote totals. Candidates impacted include county, state, and federal election units. Through the utilization of the automated ballot count machine in Pima County elections, which were Indian, but they have the same pretty much functionality. My understanding is that 35,000 was embedded in each Democrat vote totals. Below are the meeting notes. At a meeting I was invited to by the Democrat Party in Pima County, Arizona on September 10, 2020, no phones or recording devices were allowed. Presentation was given, including detailed plans to embed 35,000 in a spread configured distribution to each Democrat candidate's vote totals. When I asked how in the world that will 35,000 votes be kept hidden from being discovered, it was stated that spread distribution will be embedded across the total registered voter range and will not exceed the registered, and the 35,000 was determined allowable for Pima County based on our county registered vote count. It was also stated that total voter turnout versus total registered voters determine how many votes we can embed. This embedding will auto-adjust based on voter turnout, because the embed votes are distributed sporadically. All embeds will not be found. If audited, because the embeds are in groups of approximately 1,000. This is so county reporter can declare an oversight issue or error as groups of 1,000 is a normal and acceptable error. So if you believe that your one vote votes for one vote, this is Maricopa County's embed totals will be substantially higher than Pima due to embeds being calculated based on the total number of registered voters. When I asked, has this ever been tested and how do we know it works, the response was yes. This has been tested and has shown significant success in Arizona judicial retention elections since 2014. Even undetectable in post-audit, because no candidate will spend the kind of funds needed to audit and contact voters to verify votes and the full potential of two voters, which is more than 500,000 registered voters. This year, our Secretary of State has removed precinct level detail for election night releases so candidates can see precinct overvotes. This is what I have from the meeting. Just thought I'd report this. Not sure if you can do anything since I was unable to have a recording device in the meeting. Again, we hope this individual would come forward and issue this as an affidavit, but this is significant, and we also noted that the reporting numbers from Pima and Maricopa County merged election day votes with write-in votes with absentee ballots, so there's no way to, in the publicly available data, to parse those votes into the segments. And I believe we noted in the piece of information that was provided to you that Maricopa County had 1.9 million mail-in ballot requests. So, and those, there was a Maricopa County official on videotape that did say that they did not validate the signatures on write-in ballots this year. So that's a 1.9 million vote fraud potential. Wow. Even if it's 0.1% of the vote, there's a lot of room for error.
Could we just review that quickly for 1 second so we get it right?
Ladies and gentlemen, please, I know that you're passionate about this, but there are a lot of people in this world that want to hear this, and if we can't hear the witnesses over remarks, that deprives people of hearing the truth.
So what I take from your testimony, Colonel, is that 35,000 votes were emitted for each Democratic County.
Correct. That is the allegation in this email.
The allegation by the gentleman who hasn't given us an affidavit,
Correct.
that they were distributed based on the voter turnout carefully so they wouldn't look suspicious.
That's correct.
And that's essentially what the Dominion, Smartmatic, that's essentially their modus operandi, right?
That's their.
They don't just put in 10,000 votes, they put it in carefully, so it's hard to detect.
They move the algorithms around to different precincts until they get the aggregate number that they want and need, and then they shift the algorithms to other precincts.
Did the Democratic candidates who got the benefit of those 35,000 false votes include Biden and Harris?
According to this email, it was all local and federal races.
So if that were true, then the result of the election is totally opposite of the one that they're so anxious to serve.
Right.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now,
And again, this
You would be the
email was
opposite.
sent to every Arizona legislature that,
now we don't know if the gentleman is telling the truth or not,
correct.
but would it be possible if you had the machines in Pima County to be able to see if there's evidence of this?
In order to do that, there would have a full forensic audit from the USB that drives the voting, to the PCM CIA cars, to the tabulators, to the.
I'm just asking, could it be done if you had the will to
Yes,
do
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
If you want to know if the vote in Pima County was or not, would you do it?
Yes, sir.
And without doing it, you really have no idea.
That's correct.
And the machines used in Pima County are different, but are they that much more?
These systems, they all have similar vulnerabilities. Our team focused on Dominion, our team focused on ES&S, and they're very similar as far as.
Did he say anything, just the same thing happened in Maricopa County?
This gentleman could be an IT specialist in Pima County. He only wrote, allegedly, he observed.
And do we have any knowledge of anyone from the state of Arizona?
I believe the legislators, some of the legislators did try to locate this gentleman.
Anybody from Orf?
Not that I'm aware of. But again, I'm not law enforcement, so I'm not sure.
But even if you can't find him, you could determine the validity of this, or maybe determine the validity of this by doing a forensic audit.
Correct.
There's an available tool that would tell you, I mean, did Biden get 35,000 phony votes?
That's correct.
And it's not being utilized by the state of Arizona.
Pima County, I believe that total vote total was less than a million in Pima County, so it would be a full audit, a ballot audit, and I also was informed that your state, through the Counterterrorism Information Center and the DPS here in Arizona, do have the capability to analyze and validate ballots for ink consistency. So if there are mass-produced ballots in Maricopa County that were stuffed, your DPS has the capability to analyze those ballots for paper consistency and ink consistency. So if there were mass-produced ballots, you could determine that on your own.
Excuse me, Colonel. So I think what you're saying, I'm going to repeat this back to you. These might be pre-printed ballots to simply move through the system. Is that what you're suggesting?
There are indications, we have affidavits from Pennsylvania, ballots that were repositioned in a bobtail trailer truck, and these ballots were, the thought was that this was a cache that they could do to take them to the specific tabulation centers. That's an affidavit that's from our Pennsylvania work.
So repeat one more time the piece that I think people will be shocked about, because it is hard to believe. Did you say that a Pima County official said they didn't validate the mail-in votes?
That was Maricopa. They didn't validate the signature. They didn't validate the signatures on the mail-in ballots.
And that's 1.9 million.
Correct.
And do we know who that is?
I would have to get the video.
Could you get it for us?
Oh, yes, sir.
No, you have to do it right now, before the end of the hearing. That would render everyone at 1.9 votes. I absolutely never checked fraud, deceit, mistake. And if they're mail-in votes, they've been separated from the envelope.
Correct.
It would indicate those are basically 1.9 million votes that are illegal votes.
Or that had the potential to be illegal votes that weren't validated. Signature.
But can we determine now if any of them are legal?
If the envelopes were separated from the ballots, there would be no a ballot. Still go back and look at the envelopes to validate signatures, but you wouldn't know what the ballot.
And isn't that the reason when you do that?
That's part of the chain of custody procedures, I believe, in Arizona.
And when they talk about chain of custody, that's what they're talking about, right?
Correct.
There's a lot of witnesses about that. So let's just sum up a few things that you also found. Tell us about the green button in Maricopa County on the machine. And there is a witness that's going to testify that all day she saw election officials constantly pressing the green button when somebody was voting.
What that was when a voter wasn't sure, and I was also linked to another witness about the differences in the pins and the Sharpies. The Maricopa division in early voting, they specified the elements for voting, and then on election day they specify only. And the idea is that as the bleed through on the ballot, as the scanners would cause an error ballot. By creating the error ballot, the officials basically would slide those votes into batch file that could be created by the election administrator, the operator. And the green button was to say, okay, there's an error, go ahead and push cast ballot, and it punches that into an error file that can be adjudicated by the election administrator.
Now, and you examined the voter database, and your team did, right?
Say again, sir.
You examined the voter database.
Those were actually some Arizona folks that examined that.
So you took
I spoke to
data. Oh, I see. You spoke to
local investigators here.
and you have your voter database described 1,000 voters at least entered into database with no sex and default date of birth, and they're non-existent in elections.
Correct, and I believe there will be a witness to discuss that later this morning.
So unless those can be, those votes would have to be
Correct, and it was explained to me that the way that happens is that you can register online for a driver's license at the same time you can register for voter registration. The driver's license doesn't require the same information as the voter rolls, and so those kind of go into a queue that the Secretary of State would approve for the voter rolls over time. But there appear to be 6,000 voters that are on the voter rolls in the voter database with no sex and a default date. So no, they entered 0101, or whatever that date was.
They also discovered over 2,000 votes that used address of a vacant. He told us about the 1,915 forms of mail-in votes that were not with regard to signature in Pima County and Maricopa County.
Correct.
Also, in Pima and Maricopa, Republican poll watchers are very often forced to stay outside, and unable to view the vote process.
Correct.
And is there an estimate of the number of illegal immigrants that voted in the election? Has anyone done an estimate of that?
The American Immigration Council suggests that there are about 300,000 ineligible voters, and then one of the local newspapers reported that there were another 312,000, I believe, non-incarcerated felons and other ineligible voters.
Has any attempt been made to investigate that, to determine if they can locate a sufficient number of illegal immigrants voting illegally that would have a bearing on the outcome of the election?
That would really be done by the county election official.
But it hasn't been done. They're going to certify the vote apparently without doing it.
I'm not aware if they.
It would be, you'd have to be an idiot not to think that illegal aliens and immigrants voted, right?
It's very possible.
How many are there in Arizona? Approximately. Anybody's guess, but what's the lowest number?
That
Can anybody help me with that?
For the local legislatures.
5 million, 4 million?
I wish we knew, sir.
Pardon me?
I wish we knew.
The lowest number we could use. 4 million?
Representative Cook?
Mr. Chairman, my colleague, Representative Townsend, and I have had several discussions over the past few weeks about that number, and she, Mr. Giuliani.
Please, Ms. Townsend.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, and Mr. Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, I can't tell you how many people are in this state that are potentially can vote illegally as an illegal alien, but I can tell you that there is a way for them to vote under the federal only voter program, meaning that someone here illegally or a fake name, anybody that can put together a voter registration card, or if they're not eligible to vote and are not in the MVD system here in Arizona, when they register to vote, if they're not found in the MVD system, they're not there, they're contacted to first anything to prove your citizenship. When they don't answer, that their name is relegated to the federal only voter list, which there's 37 in the state of Arizona of people who prove their citizenship, can't prove they exist, other than when they do election day, all they have to do is show their bank statements, their title to their car, anything you can reproduce on your own computer with your fake name on there or whatever, and onto a bank statement, and you get a ballot, and you can vote for president and your congressperson and senator. Up to 36,000 plus people in Arizona could potentially vote, and I do have numbers of who has voted in Maricopa County. It's 4,100 of the true federal only, and another 4,000 that are supposedly out of state. So those alone haven't been researched deeply enough to know, does name even exist as a person? And are they here, someone here who's here or not? So we don't know upwards of 8,000 people in Maricopa County alone who have cast a ballot, weren't able to.
Well, that's pretty astonishing. So I will say, I may be wrong, but let's say there were 5 million illegal aliens in Arizona. It is, it's beyond credulity that a few 100,000 didn't vote, particularly given Representative Townsend's explanation that there's an encouragement that goes on to have them vote. Now, every one of those votes would be an illegal vote. Every one of those votes denies a lawful voter of their franchise, just wipes it out. Has there been any attempt to investigate that after the election, even on a sample basis, like going to a district where there are a large number of possible illegal aliens, back, check names, their file.
Mr. Chair.
Totally.
Can I speak to that, Mayor?
Yes, please, please.
So we put in a unit, the Attorney General, I've been on the phone with them, asking them what are they going to be doing into this, and they told us that they don't have the authority to go out and look for crime. They can't go out and do an audit, they can't go out and, I also was told the same thing by the Board of Supervisors, that they cannot perform an audit above and beyond what's already been done that's in statute. So all we're really left with that I'm aware of is having, and as much as I appreciate this forum today, and I'm very grateful for you, we need an actual committee hearing, like I'm the chair of the committee. If we were to hold an actual committee hearing, we would have subpoena power to go and look at the machines, to look at these things, and inspect them. And get down to it. We can do an audit, we just need to conduct a committee hearing to give us that subpoena power to be able to do so.
Mr. Julian?
So when this vote is certified, there is no question anymore that the vote total who are not citizens of the United States. The question is, how many? And the officials certifying have made no effort to find out the truth, which seems to me gives the state legislature a perfect reason to take over the conduct of this election, because it's being conducted irresponsibly and unfairly. And why doesn't your state legislature exercise its responsibility under the Constitution?
That is the essential question that we are here to ask.
So, anything else, Colonel? You did a great job. He's available for any more questions.
If you are done,
All day.
if you're done, Mr. Giuliani, we do have a number of questions from the panel members for you, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir. The first thing I'd like to ask is, you spoke on system capability. And I know that much has been made of the excoriation of data on the Dominion and software and all that. Can you provide just a very short comment on why they said, not only are we not recommending this, we're prohibiting the use of this equipment in our state?
Vulnerabilities that were issued, not addressed, and unfixed. There were too many system vulnerabilities.
Okay. And referenced accounts, and I'm struggling at DHS say security for this election was the best it ever been. Do you have any input?
So, we're committed to learning the truth. Senior league.
Much
Our local, of our local DHS personnel and hours going through this data. At the end of that, one of them said, "I think I need to go outside and throw up."
Okay, so besides that, did they do anything about it?
Had multiple follow-ups. drove up to our Dallas, our team, received over 600 gigabytes of data that have been accumulated over time. Our team provided them over 200 gigabytes of, and they analyzed that. After they analyzed, there was a scan, a passive scan done. They conducted a limited scan and determined that there were vulnerabilities. They held numerous meetings and with their folks, the CISA, the cyber side, INA, which is Intelligence Assessment Division.
And I'm sorry, CISA, could you let the folks who are watching what CISA is?
This is the agency and DHS is responsible for cyber infrastructure.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Biasucci.
One note that might be important. Members of the election division of CISA, I was told would never attend meetings or the briefings that were conducted internal to DHS on the material that we have presented.
And I'm sorry, who is that did not participate?
The election security division within inside the DHS.
Okay, Representative Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Colonel. I just wanted to make sure I have this correct. So when we're talking about this, Mr. Brad, is that correct? He stated the most secure election in history. We're not connected to the internet. He stated no votes leave this country. This is all things he stated publicly.
So on the CISA website, correct?
Right. So are you willing to say under oath that you have seen the internet? You have seen it go offshore to Germany, Frankfurt. Are these things that you have personally seen and can say that is not true?
Our white hat hackers, yes, they have trafficking the packets.
Why would he make that kind of comment, do you think?
Either not knowing, believing the myth, or not wanting the truth to be known.
Thank you.
Senator Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Colonel. I've got a couple of questions on the Board of Supervisors. During one of their hearings, it said that the text for this equipment, that's, by the way, the county doesn't own this equipment, it's leased, like Dominion and SmartMatic. But is it irregular, is it SOP for the tech reps to be there during the election process?
Yeah, that's been something we observed in Michigan and Pennsylvania, whether they're full-time Dominion employees or contractors, there are Dominion employees that are there to run the equipment.
Is it the Board of Supervisors hearing, they'd actually made comments that they actually provided them an office space in the county for them to handle this stuff. My question is, a couple of weeks ago, they did a test to show that the system was secure, so they did it before and then after test, so everybody could see that the Board of Supervisors in county elections. This cannot, so what you're hearing is false. Obviously, or is it during that test? Can they find the anomalies in there during that basically what I always call a dog and pony show? Would that show up in one of these tests?
In a forensics examination?
No, just see, come here and look at this is how we certify the machines, calibrate the machine, whatever, zero it out, this and that. Obviously, these anomalies would not be showing up during that moment, correct?
Correct, and it's our understanding that Dominion had a software update at least in a couple of states. I'm not sure about Maricopa County, but like the day before the election.
Representative Bartow, any questions?
I did have one question. Thank you, Colonel. Excellent information. You described web traffic increase during the election as opposed to how do you measure the increase?
Are you talking just on the Dominion server network?
Yes.
They just look at volume of data that's moving through the pipes. And I'm not our hacker team they're the experts. I just kind of the big picture know how to answer, but they do measure volume traffic. Matter of fact, on the Frankfurt server on election day, there was a German cybersecurity professor that was noting that the increase in traffic was, he related it back to COVID and said, hit our indoors winter season yet, and we've hit the highest traffic, and he specifically noted that one of the reasons was these.
Was it an exponential increase?
I don't think it's been exponential, but I think it went from 7 point something terabytes a second to 10 terabytes, so it went to a lot of, a pretty big increase, not exponential.
Okay, to my unqualified mind, I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds big.
The volume jumped up pretty significantly on November 3rd and 4th to that particular server in the pipes.
Thank you.
So essentially about 33, 34, 35% increase.
I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but
I mean, from 7 to 10.
Ballpark.
Yeah, that's big.
I can't remember exactly.
Senator Gala, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, talking about the SGO system, and that was, you said Hugo Chavez, he was partial owner in that. Now, that's the beginning of Dominion.
SGO was a separate company, but Dominion acquired Sequoia Systems that was spun off of SGO. And they also acquired Premier, which was spun off of Diebold, but they all have the common core, common code really goes back to SGO. And then one org chart that I put up there kind of showed the licensing agreements that go back and forth between SGO and Dominion. So it's the licensing for the software and the code.
So it still stems from the SGO system.
That's correct.
So, and then you state Dominion. So does that, when they see the vote count, that the county's estate?
They process it, they retain it. It's in their first.
So they have the votes of the South as well, and it's supposed to property of the state.
They got the voter data, voter registration.
And then you said Dominion Center Crabs, is that right?
That was on the CISA website.
You say the board, what is the board?
It was their Election Security Advisory Council.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Roberts, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel Walton, earlier you were talking about the method via internet and internal methods as far as, I think you used the term, I forgot exactly. Methods from the internet and then also internally that there could be manipulation of votes. So my question is do you have any knowledge of where the machines in Arizona get to the internet at any point in time? And if not, or if so, are there logs internally in these machines that if we were to be able to subpoena these machines and demand them so they could be examined, could we see all of those changes that were made?
So when you watch CBS, CNN, any of the mainstream media where they've got the live vote updates, that data is passed live. I mean, it's as the votes are updated. So it's, nobody's getting in a plane and flying the hard drive to New York. I mean, it's uploaded, it's connected. So it is connected to the internet, and whether it's locally, I mean, they can move votes with the cards, the voter cards. Those could be loaded laptop interdicted and upload fake votes as in the allegation from Hemet County, you know, in batches of 1,000. They can scan blank ballots, and then the administrator can allocate that batch of blank ballots to one candidate or another, either 100% or any percentages that they allocate in the, you know, according to the issue bank.
So to that point, just give me indulge me just a moment. Would you say that that is what we saw in the 2018 election with Governor Bevin? Where we actually saw on television, real time, the movement of some 500 votes from one candidate, and I mean, it was so stark, you saw them go down on one and up on the other in the exact number. Would that be a manifestation of what you're talking about?
So the working hypothesis from our counterparts on that, because they worked out and launched it, and they actually went to Kentucky to assist the team there, was that was a server level interdiction. So they went up to the server, downloaded a CSV file, changed the votes, and re-uploaded it.
Thank you, Representative Roberts.
So, just to kind of back on what we were just discussing, it's my understanding, because there was an article here in Arizona, from the Arizona Daily Independent, there was a quote-unquote whistleblower that was talking about issues that they had observed. And so one of the things they were talking about was that the data from the machines was being moved via the hard drive. So what you just described as far as the real-time data being uploaded and all that stuff, just for the layman, that same type of manipulation, whether you plug in an Ethernet cable or what have you, or you're doing it on a user interface, that same type of malfeasance could be accomplished in that method as well.
Yeah, and I think in looking at these systems, we identified, you know, almost a dozen ways that you could inject or interdict to manipulate votes.
On that note, you said earlier that pretty much all of these machines have vulnerabilities. So is there any system out there that you're aware of that is worth exploring, or do we just need to go back to the paper ballot?
There is MIT developed a system with some capital infusion. It's a system called VOTZ, V-O-A-T-Z, and it's a blockchain type system. Again, it's when I first became aware of this, I went and talked to some friends of mine who were bank presidents. I said, okay, why can't we apply banking principles? Because if you want anything done right, you go talk to the money people. That's who protects their stuff. And he said, oh yeah, it's an app. You can do it as an app with tie it in with real ID and a blockchain type solution, or you know the next generation solution. But there are systems, and I believe the VOTZ system is deployed right now. I believe I know West Virginia is one that I remember reading on their website.
Thank you. Sir, Senator Allen, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate it. Thank you, Colonel, so much for being here today. I'd like to go back to the Board of Supervisors letter where they talk about certifying the Maricopa County election. And they have 5 points that they make for the reason why they call this a reliable election. And my concern is, of course, over the Dominion tabulation equipment. They said it was vetted by bipartisan equipment certification advisory committee before the contract was finalized. And as required by law, the committee tested the functionality and accuracy of tabulation equipment before it was used in any Arizona election. Well, after listening to your testimony, that does not give me any confidence, because the machines, of course, can perform very accurately. It's after the fact, after the election starts, after the ballot is starting to be put into the machine, that these problems start arising. So is that accurate to say that this should not give us confidence about this being a reliable election?
Ma'am, anything that is software-based can be manipulated and changed with a click of a button, or, you know, you got 2 USB drives, plug one in, and you get one algorithm, pull it out, you plug another one algorithm. And we also believe on the connectedness. These can be pushed down from the top and shifted down. So think of it like a casino or a state lotto. Whoever owns the eye in the sky, you can control the markets. And that's really, I think, what we're looking at.
Well, and certainly from your testimony, I can see that. And I have one more question if I could, Mr. Chairman.
I believe Senator Burley has it to that point.
All right, go ahead.
All right, please proceed.
Well, I was going to switch down to the 1% early ballots that they did, and I had a question about that. So Sonny, if you have something to what I said before, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, so basically what you're saying, for example, since the techs are already there on site, they're under the process. So if the machine jams up and naturally they call the tech over there to go fix the unjam, they could literally, without anybody noticing, because they're the techie people, they could stick a thumb drive in there and upload, change the numbers, manipulate, whatever.
There was an affidavit in Pennsylvania from, I think it was last week. A gentleman supervisor had a Ziploc bags full of USB drives, and they noted that he was inserting the USB drives into the machines at a much higher rate than would be necessary or that they had seen in the past. So, yes, you know, it's very, very.
So now I have it to that point. Forgive me, but what I think you're saying is that they have just created an electronic footprint, either in the data download that you're seeing real time, that you'd be seeing some kind of a spike, or is there something that's captured on the machine that itself, like a memory card that is resident on the machine, not that is actually talking to the hard drive?
The machines, for the most part, the voting machines are just run by, removable software and data cards, the cards that actually hold the votes. The backup servers is really where the true story would reside as far as the uploads, downloads, the change, the error warnings for the mismatch errors.
So would you be able to show with specificity a machine from county going all the way across the pond, inserting data into the server? Or would it be an aggregate of all the machines that were in Maricopa County, for example? Is it by individual tabulator, or is it by the server here that collects? Can you help me understand that piece?
I'll put up
That probably goes back to your headache graph, I'm thinking.
Yeah, a schematic that sort of shows that.
The reason I asked the question is we're still looking for evidence, and if that is in the evidence package, that's certainly something that we would want to know about. If we don't have it today, something to forward to the body would be great.
Let me see if I can make this bigger. So this is Dominion voting, the high level. It's a block diagram of how everything's connected, and I can print this off and provide it to you or whoever would do your audits. But it's kind of hard to see when it's blown up. But you got ballot boxes, ballots taken out. This tracks all the way through the image cast central to ballot images, and this is really what's voted. The ballots are scanned into these image casters, and there's an electronic image created. It goes into results files, and then it goes into validation, adjudication, auditing, reporting, and publishing. And then to Democracy Suite EMS, the Democracy Suite servers, the database servers, the document management servers, and it kind of shows you how this all goes out to the world from this whole system. Election data, this is kind of the top feed to all these servers. This is really, it's a computer. company. It's all networked. It has to be.
So let me reframe the question. We probably would not be able to identify any specific tabulation machine showing up on the server because it's all aggregated.
Yeah, these tabulation machines go through this process, but the results files. So if you work it backwards from the server, you would be able to go back to a valid image, an electronic valid image.
All right, thank you. Senator Allen? you have
Yes.
Another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing in this letter by the Board of Supervisors was, they commented, again, of what made this a reliable election, that the election day ballots from 2% of vote centers and 1% of early ballots is required by Arizona law, and it yielded a 100% match to the results produced by the tabulation equipment. So that should give us, and all the counties do this. They do this hand count, this little audit of a small percent of the votes to see how it matches up to the machine. So could you explain how we shouldn't have confidence in that particular, how can they make that match up to the machine then when they just arbitrarily pick out 1%? If there's vote dumps that are happening and things that are happening throughout the process.
I would just say it's something we learned a long time ago, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got 1.9 million votes that the signatures aren't verified, and they're just reading bubbled in, ballot cards, then yes, the ballot cards, when they run 1,000 ballot cards through, are going to come out with 1,000. So that small batch would represent what those particular ballots say, but that's why there's chain of custody requirements, that's why there's verification requirements at each step along the way. So if one of those steps is broken, then the validity of the whole process is in question. You just don't know.
Right. Thank you. I think we're definitely, sir, in a new day when it comes to what is taking place across this country with voting, and we're going to have to probably really look at that. Thank you.
Representative Johnson, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Colonel, I just have a quick follow-up to some of the stuff we've been talking about as far as the security of the machines themselves. And as we know, like whether or not something happened or didn't happen, I'm most concerned with voter confidence. And if there's all these holes, then we're going to really deflate or collapse voter confidence. So I would like you to reassure me on one particular item in the tabulation room at the Big Tech here in Phoenix. In years past, you had to have a special badge, and only people that were certified to be in that room with the machines and the tabulation and all that were allowed in there. This year, I was told yesterday we had teams of 25 adjudicators in that room in the tabulation with those machines. Would it have been possible for someone in that scenario to wander over to the machine and have a conversation and put in this thumb drive you're talking about, or is it deeper than that, or something that's happened from remotely, or how secure are these machines? Because we know there's no chain of custody on the hard drives, and the machines we saw maybe left alone for almost a week in one of the voting centers, untended, secure. How could somebody regular nefarious intentions walk up and change this whole election by putting in a thumb drive and changing the algorithm? Is that something that could happen, or we don't have to worry about that?
Either an individual that has knowledge of the systems and how to, operate in the system could have an impact, again, from the server. They could be sitting in Nigeria as long as they've got an internet connection, they can get to that particular server. If they had access to, the data from the malware that's on the server, they could get the login and password from, a Pima County operator or, a Maricopa County operator. So there are just so many places that they can be interdicted or penetrated. There's just too many to describe. There's a lot of ways it can be interdicted.
Mr. Chair, Colonel, so what I'm hearing you say is I can't be confident that a volunteer of a political party that, that the entire recorder's office and the elections director, everyone could have been on the up and up, and this is the most secure election ever, but if one random volunteer with the right information were to be in the tabulation room, could have been breached the security of the machine.
Correct.
Therefore, we cannot stand here and say we are confident that that kind of access to these machines left in buildings for a week, we cannot say with certainty that this is a secure election, and we have 100% confidence that nothing went wrong.
And you just brought up the chain of custody issue, and that's a critical vulnerability path. So that if the chain of custody was broken, then you really don't know. You can't say with confidence that it was a fair election.
And Mr. Chair, for a last point, if you were in charge, would you want a recount? Would you want an audit? Would you want a do-over? What would you do?
A forensic audit will tell you what was processed, but to the mayor's point earlier, as soon as those mail-in ballots, which were 1.9 million requested, I think a good percentage returned. If those signatures weren't verified, then you can count the same things over and over again, but you're starting with flawed results already. An audit, a full audit, would be able to tell you if those were, bad ballots or pre-printed ballots. You could do a full forensic audit on the actual ballots, but once the envelopes are separated from the ballots on that many mail-in ballots, it's almost impossible to go back without doing a forensic analysis of each ballot and paper being.
Okay, Mr. Chair and Colonel, do you have any information about potential shipments of ballots to Arizona and other places from North Korea or something? Do you have any information like that?
There were several affidavits that were provided to the legal teams. I don't have those affidavits with me now. There were affidavits and suggestions, and I think more of those are in process to obtain more affidavits on those processes.
Then, Mr. Mayor, can you tell us whether or not you've got, I don't know if you heard the question, or do you have affidavits that counterfeit ballots were somehow shipped into Arizona?
I have to look.
All right, thank you. Representative Cook, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I'll make it brief, but I do have some stuff that I'd like to say is that, Colonel, when I ran for office in 2016, I got a phone call one day that one of our county recorder's office information had been breached, and all of the voter information was for sale on the dark web. That was my first instance of becoming representative about this hacking and computer stuff and what's out there. I just went through my third election as a top vote getter, and I would like to say that I continuously have been tried to be hacked on my personal or ledge account or whatever is out there on the internet. I later learned from people, Colonel, that the reason why this is done out of the country, and according to your graph, is that it is harder for us to track these people down and prosecute them when these computer anomalies and things happen from outside the country, inside our country and state. Would that be true?
We would not have the legal jurisdiction to go seize or search a server outside of the U.S.
Thank you, Colonel. And would this make sense that if you had a simple phone number and then you went on the internet and then researched that phone number where you received a text message and it was from Ukraine, would that not be a red flag that your phone or information was trying to be attacked or infiltrated?
Correct.
Okay, so moving on to that, Colonel, what I've noticed is that about these voting machines and these plugged-in USB drives, when in fact, when we watch across this great country of ours, in many states, we have very few amount of counties compared to other states in here. You got to target 2 counties. If you notice that rural Arizona and rural Arizona legislators are up here, we're ready to go to work today. Our constituents demand it, and we demand it as their representatives to work for them. But what happens, Colonel, is that the same thing when we look at this country on a map and counties that vote for President Trump versus counties that don't get in the map. So I'm going to get to my point about Maricopa and Pima County. Okay, we all, in rural Arizona, we call it the great state of Maricopa, because Maricopa County has more legislators at the legislature than Arizona does. If we add all of ours, we still don't have numbers to be an equal voice at the state legislature, but we have to work harder, which we can. If we look at Maricopa and Pima County, if I was going to, now we're going to get down to vote centers, okay? Targeted vote centers, Colonel. I wouldn't have to have a USB drive or to infiltrate every voting machine in every vote center in Maricopa and Pima County, would I? Or would I just need to target those individual voting centers in those two massive counties in the state to do what you are saying, to take votes and shift them over in those numbers? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I've seen analyses that boil down national elections to zip codes. To just zip codes.
Mr. Chairman, I get fired up when I get into this stuff because I read and hear everything that these people have said. It has happened to me. And I just thank you again for your information. But when I go back to the 2016 hacking, what I see as a pattern, Colonel, is that there's a plan. There's a larger plan, and it's not a conspiracy theory, and I'm not nuts. But if I wanted to engage in a plan in 2016, Colonel, would I not have databases and information of projecting of why do we have, what is the number, 2,000 or 1,200 voters, I believe in Maricopa County, registered that I believe have voted at a vacant lot? I mean, if I really wanted to go down the road, isn't that the way you would target it?
Yeah, and again, it's you can predict this at multiple levels and multiple methods, and I think that's what's happening. There's out there, and it's to your point, you know, you're not, but it's really hard. They made it so hard for the public to understand it, and we call that in deception operations ambiguity increasing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colonel, I have the last question is, and what concerns me over what I've read and seen is that could the data that you say could be traced back only to the scan ballot at this point, so it can't go back, could that be bits, or could that be, could the tracks, as long as get the machines and check these things out, could there be time to erase that information and cover up if there was a crime or misdeeds?
There could, but now the batch files will go back to the precinct and the machines on the tapes, so you can track it all the way back to the precincts by the tapes, and it's what we showed in the Antrim County, those printouts on the precinct level, so that you can go back. But really all that's necessary to do, there's not really a bleach bit, it's just pulling the USB drive out of the voter machine and the tabulators. So the machines themselves, other than really don't have a lot of resident information. They can have some stored images, but you know, where you retain these the federal election requirements require I can't remember the U.S. Code Title 46 rings a bell, at the 22-month retention of federal elections records. It would be done in those the ballot images and electronic backups. So the data is retained, and you can do forensics on it as long as it's the actual servers and the actual machine.
Thank you for your time, your patriotism. Chairman, I yield the remaining time I may have.
Thank you. I believe Senator Garland has one more question, and I just need to remind the panel, time grows short. I think Mayor Giuliani has significant more witnesses and evidence that he'd like to have
Thank you, Mr. Colonel. I just want to get on, come back to the Dominion situation here. Where are the backup
I'm sorry?
servers?
I am not exactly trying to get that information provided to you.
And this, I think the mayor said they were a foreigner company. Canadian, is that what it is?
So we know our sites in Toronto, their offices are in Canada, so we know there were data there. They also have servers in Serbia and other countries. But as far as knowing for sure where the data from Maricopa County went and resides, we know that. But they've got backup servers.
So an audit, because we talked about that a little earlier. First off, would that find where the server is and where the information would be?
Tracing the flow of the information, yes, sir.
The audit would do that.
Correct.
But it also tell us whether or not it's true or not that the 1.9 million signatures were or were not verified, right? So we would have an absolute.
So that would be it.
Colonel, could you get a little bit closer to the microphone? I'm getting a lot of people are saying, I can't hear the guy talk.
Okay. So the adjudication of the signatures on the ballots, that would be totally separate. Wouldn't be necessarily a digital forensic process, but that audit would be, have to be conducted at the county level on all the envelopes.
So if we did an audit, we were able to do that. Tell me the things that could come out of that.
Well, if the signatures on the envelopes were invalid, you could necessarily get a percentage of the votes that would be disqualified. But again, when the ballots are separated from the envelopes, you can't tell which ballot came from which envelope. So really all that would tell you is a percentage of that, the percentage of those mail-in or absentee ballots that were not legitimate.
So what could the server tell us?
The server will basically tell you all the electronics. So once the ballots are matches and the images, that'll also tell you any changes to the software, any updates, algorithms that were in place, and that's all present at the code level. And that's really what these companies have balked at, providing access to the code, because they say that that's their intellectual property, and it's they've been successful at preventing folks from analyzing the code.
So they're utilizing their system for our elections, but it's their property.
And counties and states have said that.
Thank you.
Senator Burley, final question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and Colonel, just for clarity, not only can these be manipulated with a thumb drive and everything else, it can be changed remotely outside the voting center.
That's correct, and there are references in the user's manual that show how they can do that.
Thank you.
Mayor Giuliani, anything else with your witness here?
No, I think
All right.
we covered everything.
Thank you,
you,
sir.
Colonel.
Do you have a next witness? I'm looking at the clock and I know we've got a time management issue with one of our witnesses.
Yes, I think we should call,
Okay.
because she has an appointment, and we'll call her first.
Okay, and then after that, Senator Pat Colbeck, we need to make sure that we have
Yes, sir.
the airport by 1 o'clock. All right, thank you very much. Anna Hort?
Is Anna Worth here?
Anna Hort? Anna
O-R-T-H.
Anna Hort.
Or we'll check on her, and let's go then to,
All right, Senator Pat Colbeck. Just so folks know that we've got folks in a separate room, just so that we can bring them out and have some kind of order here. Senator Colbeck. Thank you, sir. If you would, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is former Michigan State Senator Patrick Colbeck, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Mr. Chair, and esteemed panel members. For 8 years, I was sitting on the other side of this testimony. I was where you were sitting, and hopefully I'll be able to provide kind of a unique perspective on what to look out for in this election. If you excuse me, I'm going to try to get my presentation up here and get that going. Check it out.
Yeah, technology's great, so you want to use it.
It's more difficult when you can't see. Resolution of the screen here, by the way. Okay. And just for background purposes, as we're looking for it to recognize when I use the flash drive. Much better. And voila. Okay.
No, we still don't have it on the screen yet. There we go.
All right.
And if you would, please put it in plain look so we can see it. All right, please proceed.
All right, thank you very much. A perfect compliment, I think, to Colonel Waldron's testimony here because kind of got a unique experience regarding this whole election process. First of all, I am a former Michigan State Senator. I served on the Michigan Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. I took those duties very seriously to the point of diagramming out all of our election processes, so I have a pretty good understanding of how elections were supposed to work from a local perspective. But I have another perspective that's useful to this discussion is that something that I couldn't do while I was running for office is actually, I served as a poll challenger in Detroit at the AV County Board for the election day from 5 p.m. through the next day into the evening of the following day on November 4th. So I was actually at the Detroit AV County Board, so you may have heard about all the things that happened there, on the cardboard up on the windows. Yes, I was there. I was one of the people blocked from returning back into the Detroit AV County Board, so I could resume my duties as poll challenger. I was up training our next batch of poll challengers as to what they need to look out for and what we had been seeing. And coincidentally, by the way, that was when they were counting the military ballots, which, just so you guys know, that's when they duplicate the ballots, because the military ballots come in a format that's different from those that can be read by these tabulators. And if you don't have a Republican and a Democrat watching that, it's ripe for malfeasance, if you will, and that's exactly what happened. So, along with that background, I'm actually a certified Microsoft small business specialist. In addition to being that, I actually did cabling design the International Space Station, so I have no problem working with technology, so it's kind of a unique background, and just so happened that I was right there at the Detroit AV County Board on the night of the election. So I'm going to focus in on just highlight 3 areas of the diagram that Colonel Waldron showed you. That's for people on the ground. These are the key pieces of technology. You talked about ImageCast Central. That's the equipment that I witnessed at the Detroit Board. It features a high-speed scanner and a workstation associated with it. These were networked in turn with adjudicator machines, which anything that was rejected by the high-speed scanner would go over to this adjudicator machine. That was part of the absentee ballot counting suite, if you will, for Dominion. In addition, they had something that is called Local Data Center, where all the election officials work computer workstation with a series of laptops, et cetera, that were connected to the rest of these computers. We'll get into that a little bit later here. But that image cast central area is one of the key pieces of, or key systems, if you will, that are on the ground for the absentee ballots in particular. If you're at an in-person polling location, you'll have the image cast precinct set up, and that's on the right-hand side of this diagram. Up on the top is kind of the local data center and the kind of the eye in the sky, the overarching look at what's going on with the election. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. And as you guys know, Dominion voting systems was used here in Arizona, in Maricopa County, and they were using some of the same equipment we were just talking about in regards to image cast precinct, and also image cast central that Kansas came in there. So, I said that I was in your position before, right? So if I were in your position, these are kind of some of the key questions I would be asking in regards to all that we're hearing about this testimony regarding this election. Number one, was the chain of custody for the election artifacts broken? And thank you very much, Senator-elect Townsend, for bringing that up. That is a key term for everybody to understand, chain of custody. And I'm going to go over a little diagram on specifically where some of my comments are going to focus in on that chain of custody. All right, and the key is to hit the right arrow. All right, and was there evidence of election fraud? There can be fraud that happens that may not even violate statute, but you know that the intent is there to fraud election. For example, in Michigan, we have evidence to suggest that's exactly what happened. Was there evidence of foreign agents with the ability to manipulate the election data and third parties getting access to that data? We believe that we've seen evidence of that as well. But the other thing we need to ask is, well, all right, what are we going to do about it if we see all this happening? And what options do you have as legislators? All right, so let's go to this chain of custody. And I could go into a lot more detail on this chain of custody, but I like to simplify it into just 4 key artifacts. Qualified voter file, i.e. who's registered to go off and vote in your state. Number 2, poll book, that's a precinct-specific extract of the data from your qualified voter file. The ballot itself, pretty important artifact, right? But then, in the spirit of the old Stalin quote, it's not he who votes that counts, it's the one who counts that counts. We gotta look at the ballot tabulator and how the votes are tabulated. And that was my focus when I went to the Detroit AV County Board. I was one of those folks that was not specifically assigned at any particular counting station. I was looking at the big picture. And we'll go over what I found here in a second. First of all, everybody hopefully has seen the idea of voter anomalies. This is our first clue that something's happening. When you're on the ground, you can see all the things that are happening, you know, onesie twosie style, and you say, hey, wait a minute, that envelope was backdated, or you can see that they adjudicated something in favor of the Democrats or the Republican or something like that. That's easy to go off and see, but it's very difficult to see the big picture. That comes out afterwards with experts like Colonel Walden. And in this case, we first started seeing issues when people were talking about Benford's law being violated. That's actually used in criminal court cases to determine whether or not fraud existed. So that was the first indicator that some of the analyses we've seen flags that. That's not proof. I mean, it's getting it's telling you that it's you've got something off here that you got to investigate. Then we've seen linear regression analyses that there's a lot of noise in, but it seemed to indicate a pattern of vote distribution that indicated some data manipulation. Then, most recently, we've actually seen folks who believe that they've identified specifically what the algorithm that was used to switch some of the data. So, some other things that were kind of odd, and you don't see while you're necessarily on the ground, but in retrospect, you'll be able to get access to it. This is actually documented as part of the affidavit that was submitted in a lawsuit that's put in Michigan by Sidney Powell and in other states. And you guys have voted quite a bit. You guys are, most of you already served in office, right? Do you remember any of your votes being tabulated with a decimal point in the back of them? I don't remember any. You're serving the Michigan Senate, any time where I actually had a decimal point after a vote tally.
So that would suggest that a partial person was voting?
Well, sometimes, you know, there were people that try to make you feel like a partial person when you serve, but no, that wasn't the case here. And so you guys have probably all heard about what I call the little switch, the Antrim County. We've heard heard testimony on that already today and some of the things that could possibly happen. Getting into the possible technical reasons for that is maybe have an internal ballot barcode switch on it, where they have one barcode style or ballot style that's flagged, and then when they associate a specific scan of a vote, they flip it over to a different barcode style that may have the voters or the candidates flipped in. Something else is something called a ranked choice voting algorithm. It's one of the modules inside of the Dominion suite. And this is where you might see evidence of, this is the only place that I know of at least that can start putting in fractions in your vote. Because if you meet a certain vote threshold, it'll go off and switch that, it'll prioritize the votes for the second choice, if you will, and give them 10% of the first choice of whoever, of the 10% or whatever number you specify. It'll actually get into the point of allocating percentages of votes to one of the candidates. Another thing is data manipulation via remote access. And another thing to look at as you guys investigate what happened here or didn't happen inside Arizona is take a look at your public accuracy test. And there are people that, this is usually in Michigan at least, it's specified what the standards are for that by the Secretary of State. And if you don't run all the possible permutations of votes that might happen on a given ballot, you may leave gaps that can be exploited. And I would submit, we're going to show one of the examples of where we believe one of those gaps is that you could maybe flip a vote from a certain candidate to a write-in candidate and preload this with write-in candidates. And we think we have evidence of that happening in Detroit. So if you want to go off and check into this, one of the things you're going to need to do, is look into compact flashcards, event logs, and paper vote tallies. So these tabulator data cards, that's where the compact, that's where a lot of the election data we wanted to look at is going to be located, so please make sure you get your hands on that. Then we talk about the big switch. I'm not going to get any detail on this. Suffice it to say, Michigan, our current vote deficit for President Trump is being projected as 154,188 votes. We have more than that we can tie back to potential fraud. So in the state of Michigan, I know a lot of people have written us off in this context, but I tell you, Michigan can play because of what the level of fraud we've seen. So here's what our Detroit 80 County Board looked like. And essentially it was set up so there's 503 precincts in the city of Detroit. They put in 134 of these ImageCast central stations all the way around. That's where the books are located. There are about 2 to 5 precincts per ImageCast central unit. We had 5 poll workers per station. Overall, I would submit there's probably less than 10 Republican workers that whole night sitting at those. And by law, we're supposed to have a Republican and Democrat adjudicating ballots. Here's what I said, that I was looking at the big picture when I got in there. I was looking at the big picture. First question I asked was one of these chief election officials, his name was Chris Thomas, I said, who I worked with when I was serving in the Senate. I said, how are you going to protect the chain of custody around the tallies of the individual tabulators and your report outs to the county and all points beyond that? So we talked about the idea of this getting reported out to the New York Times, you can see it on CNN and all that kind of stuff. Show me how that chain of custody is protected. And this election official, who was state elections director in Michigan for 2 decades, said, I don't know. Now, this is kind of an important data point, don't you think? And I was badgering him the rest of the night, and I said, you know what? He finally acquiesced and said, tell you what, I'll let you know. And then finally, the last statement he had on it, because I was pretty persistent, was saying, you know what, I'm not going to tell you until after tomorrow. And I go, well, you know what the primary duty of a poll challenger is? To make sure that the election process are executed effectively, efficiently, and accurately, in a transparent manner. He did not allow that to be done. Now, I can see physical transfer of data. I can watch when somebody moves a flash drive from a tabulator to a central station, and I can go off and verify vote counts at that handoff. I can't get inside wires to go off and trace electrons through the Ethernet cables that I saw in position, and that's the next point I want to highlight. And this is important to understand here, is how these were connected. A lot of these election officials swear up and down that these machines were connected to the internet. And that's based on propaganda being pushed by companies like Dominion Voting Systems. They will say that they have an air gap. They will say that they have firewalls in place. They have encryption in place. And I hope to demonstrate here that that doesn't mean a heck of a lot. And any hacker worth their salt knows that if one computer is connected to the internet, they're all connected to the internet, firewall or not. And so here's a diagram that I put together based on, and this is literally midnight the next night before I forgot everything. I want to make sure I document everything that was there. I went through and physically traced all the cables from all the tabulators and adjudicators to the local data center at the top. So it's that local data center that we have election officials that did confirm that that was connected to the internet, but they said none of the tabulators or anything else were connected to the internet. I can show physical connection between those tabulator machines, the Ethernet cables, two routers or managed switches, up to tell from 12 feet away. But it's a router type of device connected to all the other devices on this network. And as Colonel Waldron pointed out, it's designed to work as a network. And so all these tabulators were connected to one another, all the adjudicators were connected to one another, the local data center that they acknowledged was connected to the internet were connected to these tabulators and adjudicators. So, and so if that wasn't enough, we went around to all the different computers and observed in the bottom right-hand corner of all the computers. I can't do this because it defaults into a certain slide presentation mode, but if you have laptops that are Windows enabled and you're connected to the internet, you roll over that and you got a Windows 10 device, roll your mouse cursor over in that bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see a LAN internet connection icon. And you roll over, it's going to pop up and say, connected to the internet. They wouldn't do that test for me to go off and demonstrate that. Yeah. So, guys, it's serious stuff, and I also want to highlight, I took a snapshot of what the Wi-Fi connections were at that point in time. And one of them was called AV_connect. I wonder what that was connecting. Part of their spec that they have in the contract with the state of Michigan that are supposed to be connected via Ethernet cables. And they even have cellular-based modems that they can plug into a lot of these items to transfer the data over the internet. They've got a Dominion Tech Support Manual that says connected to the Ethernet. There's no denying that this was network connected. And by the way, even if they say it wasn't connected to the internet, in the Detroit AV County Board, I can trace a physical connection that says that the system that used to tabulate 172,000 plus votes in the state of Michigan was all networked together. So even if it wasn't some guy sitting in a ice shanty in Antarctica connected to the internet, that one guy in the city of Detroit that had access to all that information could modify the votes locally there. And so, why does it matter? Well, we already talked about these man-in-the-middle attacks. We talked about that they're in the City Hall lawsuit that's out there. There's additional exhibits that highlight that these passwords are available on the internet. And when you have a man-in-the-middle attack, you think you're getting the right data, you think you're talking to the right person, but you ain't. You're talking to an in-between guy. We also got NAIST that left a key under the map. What do I mean by that? All the specs on what files to look for, what their file size is, everything else for the voting system is left up on the internet for everybody to go off and take. I went there myself. I could download this file, took that extract from it. You can find out everything you need to go off and manipulate as a hacker. And we've got Challenger observations on the ground that attest to each and every one of these. And I just want to highlight one of them, the poll worker observation, that he actually observed the fact that the printout of the tape said that there were write-in candidates on it, yet when you actually, he will test in his affidavit that there were no write-in ballots.
Senator Holden,
Yep.
we're out of time.
Yep.
So thank you very much for your testimony. We also appreciate the slide deck that you presented, and if you are willing, would you please distribute that to the members of this panel, and I'm sure Mayor Giuliani would like to have it as well.
I'll leave a copy for everybody.
Any questions for this gentleman, Mayor? Or would you like to move on to Anna Orth?
We can move on to.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator. Anna Orth, would you please come up to the witness stand? I guess it's a table, not a stand. I was just corrected. Witness sit. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please give your name and Mayor, the floor is yours.
My name is Anna, and I'm a resident and registered voter in Pima County. I volunteered as a poll observer.
Can you get a little bit closer?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Anna. I'm a resident and registered voter in Pima County. I volunteered as a poll observer on October 16th, and then I signed up to work as a poll worker on November 3rd in a neighboring precinct. Would you like me to just give you an overview? Is that?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Well, I wrote in because I was aware of some irregularities that happened while I was a poll observer and some different activity that I just felt uncomfortable with on election day. So I'll go ahead and start with what happened on the day that I was an observer. I was certified prior to that to be able to watch the two people that would be correcting the problematic ballots, which I guess are called, they were duplicates. When I walked into the room, they said, "I'm sorry, no, you can't be in here. You're going to go into another room." So I had to walk back to the front desk. I was escorted from that area back to the one area where the ballots were being separated from their envelope. And I was, there were 30 to 32 people doing this, and there were probably 14 to 17 tables where they are set two people. And it was supposed to be a Democrat and a Republican. But not every table had a Democrat, but not every table had a Republican. So many of those tables had either a Libertarian or there was one table with someone from the Green Party, and then there were 3 or 4 tables that had a Pima County worker at each of those tables. And they worked there at the elections office because when people came in from the building, they talked to them, and their conversations led me to believe things like, "Oh, did you leave your lunch? Did you bring lunch?" And they said, "No, it's over in my office. I'm going to go get it later." And she was back in 5 minutes. So similar situation conversations that went on with people who came in with those workers. I found it difficult for me to be able to oversee 32 people and what they were doing. I was able to catch a few of the things that were mistakes or where ballots were they were taking them out of the envelopes and putting them on in a pile. And their job in this particular room was to watch, to make sure that the ballots were in one direction, and then they would double check the count of the ballot to the envelope I imagine to check it against the envelopes that came in. Each table was given a bin to put these in, and these bins would then go to another area where they were being stacked up to be tabulated on October 22nd. Many of these had mistakes where they were written in pencil, and the workers, as I went around, had questions of, is this a good ballot, is this not? I was told by the gentleman that ushered me out of the place where I was supposed to be and said, "You aren't supposed to talk to anyone. You do not communicate with them. If you have an issue or you see an issue, you need to go to the supervisor, which is at the front of the table, front of the room." So as I saw things, as I went around to each table, I would go to the supervisor and I let her know, they don't know what to do with this ballot. It's a pencil or blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, "No, it's fine, it's fine." So as I went back to the tables where I saw these issues, under my breath, I said, "You need to go tell her. You need to go talk to them about this." And so many of them said, "What do I do with this ballot? It's in pencil." "Oh, it's fine, it'll go through." or some people wrote over their ballot, over the little oval circle where they were supposed to mark, and those were put into a pile, a separate pile that would be called duplicates. Those duplicates then went to another table and were then taken to the room where I had been ushered out. And there was one person, there was supposed to be a second person, and I said, is there a Republican at that table? Because I said, is there a Democrat and a Republican? And he said, well, we hope so. They have to, if they get here, but it'll just be, just be me, and hopefully a second person. So, as I saw these ballots along this area that they marked as dupe, which I understood to stand for duplicates that were going to be fixed, they would then be taken to the table, to the room where I could see a glass, it was a glass wall between us, and they were taken around to the other side to be dealt with. I didn't get to see that at that point. So when I left and the other person took over for me at 1 o'clock, I was there for 5 hours. I shared with her, I said, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening. They're not putting them in the order that they need to be in. So when they get folded, they become a duplicate because they can't be counted. The machine wasn't going to accept them, so it had to be then taken out of the pile and put into a duplicate. So when I left, the man who had ushered me out of the room, the first room, came to get me at 1 o'clock and walked me straight over to the front desk. And he said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, my concern is not necessarily where I was. It was hard for me to watch 32 people by myself. But more concerning is when these ballots were opened in the other room. And so to give you kind of a sense of how it worked is the ballots, however they were collected, were brought into an initial area of the Office of the Elections in Pima County. And that room, the envelopes were then opened up and the signatures were checked. So then they would go through a double door where they were then sent to the room that I was in, where there were as many people as I explained before, trying to put them in an order, not necessarily of where they were from, but how they came in. So let's just say there were maybe 200, 250 per box, I'm not sure, but they came from different zip codes, different areas. It was whatever was mailed in. And then those were then put aside to be counted after the 22nd. My concern was the amount of ballots that were considered to be problematic that were then leaving the area that I was in, going to a room where there were only supposed to be 2 people, and yet not even sure there was 2 people. So that was my experience as an observer that I shared. I thought that was concerning. The other thing is when I came back to drop off my ballot, I had to drop it off outside, and there was no longer a police officer. We found out that it was because our mayor, or not I live in North Valley, but the Tucson mayor wasn't allowing a police officer in front of the office anymore because it was upsetting to people to come and vote. And so I asked the man, I had to put my ballot out here. And he said, yes. So I said, how can I be sure someone isn't going to come and take this big box? And he said, no, we're watching it. And I said, who's you? And it was him and an elderly woman who was about 85. I don't know, and I'm sorry, meaning that she looked fragile, and I don't know how that could be protected. But I was a little concerned about that. It did make it in because when I checked my ballot, it was counted. But another question is how do we know who we voted for? That's a separate issue, but my point is that I don't know if my ballot actually has the people that I voted for. And, as I said, that's something separate from what I experienced there as an observer. As a poll worker, I was assigned to be a provisional ballot clerk, and that was on election day. And on that day, I had worked the primary in August, so I had an idea of who would come by, what the issues were. But this time, we had so many more people who needed a provisional ballot than we had been allotted to have in this one precinct. So that was concerning. But the people that came to me were, I had so many people who said, I didn't ask for a mail-in ballot. My wife isn't listed as an early ballot person, but I am. And those are the kind of people that we had a lot of. But secondly, I had people who had just moved here from other states, and most of them were from 2 apartment complexes. It was concerning because as we counted them, we probably had over 40 people who were in one apartment complex with one address who had moved here from other states that I began to turn away. I'd say, I don't know, within the hour, we were so busy that I took a break and went outside. And a gentleman with a yellow shirt said, hi, I'm with the Democratic Party. I'm here from California, and I'm here at this precinct specifically. I came from Phoenix, in Maricopa County, a precinct there, and we're here to help turn Arizona blue. And I don't know if just looking at me, he decided that he felt safe saying that to me. Maybe he assumed that I would be okay with that. I was shocked, and I said, oh, so what? He said, oh, I said, so what is your plan? What are you doing? And he said, well, I have lawyers on call to contact immediately if they don't allow them to vote, people to vote. And I said, well, there was a cutoff date. And he said, no, every vote should count. So that made me nervous, of course, because I didn't know the law specifically, and I didn't want to do something that would cause a problem. So I thought, and he said, oh, I only had to turn away, just a couple people were turned away, and I was able to help one person go back in. Well, that was probably sent to me because I was the provisional ballot clerk. So, of course, that was somebody that I had to take care of. So I went back in and thought, well, this is unusual. I'm concerned that somebody outside is going to be calling an attorney on something I did, because I said, no, I sent somebody away. I said, I'm sorry. I mean, if you don't have any proof that you've lived here or proof of having registered, I can't give you a ballot. So I called the recorder's office and explained this, and she said, well, you have to let them, all votes will count. It's on a case-by-case basis. So at that point then, I had to call in to the recorder's office at every single ballot. You have to understand, we ran out of spaces. So, I mean, we were at like 200. I'm sure you can check on this to be sure, but we were over the amount of ballots we had. But every time I called the recorder's office, they would ask me for their name and their date of birth. And when they would look that up, the person on the phone would say, okay, well, you can go ahead and let them vote. And so I was trying to find a constant that I could go by so that we could speed up the process. Is it if they've moved here and they have this, and if they've moved here at a certain date, what is it? And they would not give me any constant. They just said, you just have to call for every case is different. So my concern and why I wrote in was that I had 2 people right after having a slew of people who came in from other states wanting to vote without having been registered and to vote for the recorder's office. I then had someone come in from Maricopa County and one from Pinal County. It just happened right after. And each of them, when I called in, they said, no, you're going to have them go back to Maricopa County. and the other one will have to go back to Pinell. And I said, well, how is that this person from Wisconsin and this person from Michigan and this person from Kentucky was able to do that? And she put me on hold for a second and then came back and said, well, it's just that we have their records more accurately than we have for Maricopa. We just can't, we're not able to process a Maricopa County ballot. So I had to send them away. But then as other people were coming through, it made me question why that was happening. So I asked them, do you have information that will prove that you are a resident, that I can verify that you are registered to vote here? And they would pull out their cards and very clearly said that they were Republican. They had a voter card. So to test this theory out, I called the reporter's office and asked them, and they were denied. I had to deny them. And so I was in a frenzy trying to take care of all of these people, but I found that the discrepancy between every vote counts, only those that the reporter's office would allow, was indicative of how they chose who they wanted to allow to vote. And there was consistency in the voter preference that they chose. And that concerned me because by the end of the night, which was at 8:15, after we counted all of the votes, they got put in the box, and we were waiting for someone to come get them. I'm in the car, and the election was already counted for Arizona, which I found following. First of all, after working 15 and a half hours taking in votes, but the experience really led me to believe that it was not, there should have been a system that we could have followed, because I understood that registered voters ended on a certain date and you couldn't come in and vote, but I was having to allow people to vote that literally had just moved here within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they were all from two different, not all of them, I take that back. There was a large majority, a large percentage of people who had addresses from 2 apartment complexes. And the last thing is that I had a homeless man who came in with a registration, and the reason I know he's homeless is because I said, where do you live? And he said, he didn't speak English, and he said, I don't have a home, but when I was at a shelter, they registered me at the recorder's office. So when I called about it, and they said, well, he was probably registered to be in this precinct. And I said, but he doesn't live here. And they go, well, it's anybody who was registered downtown can vote. And so I found that to be odd. And last week, for work, I was on the other side of town, and I saw this gentleman on the south side of Tucson with his shopping cart. And I swung into the parking space and called him and just said, hi, can I talk to you? He saw me, he ran out, for who knows why. But my point is these are the kind of people that had apparently permission to vote in a precinct that was literally 25 miles away because they had a voting card that was given to them from downtown, that it was a downtown precinct that allowed him to vote here. So my point is that if somebody from Pinell County and Maricopa County can't vote, how is it that in this precinct, how is it that a homeless man from another area of the town and also people from other states were able to get permission to vote? And that was concerning to me. That's why I'm here.
Ms. Hart, thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions specific to this witness? Sure. Please proceed.
A couple of them. Try to.
Just to give you a marker on attendance, 12:02.
So you were there for 16 and a half hours, Ms. Horst?
On election day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And you're supposed to work with the the ballots that were being examined?
I was working with the voters, the ballots of voters who were not able to walk into the precinct to vote normally on a ballot. So some of them came to me saying, it says that I got an early ballot and I never got it. Others said, it doesn't even say that I'm on there. It says that I've already voted or I'm not allowed to vote here. Those are the kind of.
So these were ballots that had difficulties?
Yes.
And there were 28 or 30 to 35 people that were looking at those ballots that you had to observe?
No, that was, okay, I just described to you my experience as a poll worker on election day. Those 30 people that I mentioned earlier were when I was a poll observer on the 16th of October at the elections office in King County.
And you were unable to see what they were doing?
It was a room as big as almost maybe half the size of this banquet room. And I was an observer watching 30.
As far away as we are?
I could walk behind them. But I couldn't walk behind 35 people at the same time.
And what were they doing?
They were taking them out of the envelope. They had been brought in from the recorder's office where the ballot had been opened. The envelope had been opened according to what I was told. The signature had already been checked in another room.
But you didn't see the signature check?
No, I didn't get to see that. They would take these out and they would take.
Did you ask to see it?
Yes, and I was
And
not
were you
allowed.
refused?
Yes. So and I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody, but as I said before, I could talk to the supervisor. These people who sat at each of these tables, who were representative of mostly one party, the Democrat Party, and they would take them out of the envelope and then put them in a pile, and then separate the inside envelope. In Arizona, we have an outside envelope and the inside envelope and then the ballot, right? So the ballot was then collected from the bin. So each table would get a bin and they would separate them, put the ballots in a pile, put the envelopes in a rubber band, put it to the side, and mark that they had such and such amount of regular ballots and such and such amount of duplicates, problematic ballots, that then had to be taken to a table, and they would separate those, take the duplicates, mark them, put them at a table, which were then taken to the original room where I had been ushered out of. Not that I was not.
In the room that you were excluded from, they examined the signatures?
Yes, no, they started examining the signatures, then were moved to this room. And then from this room, they were then piled to then be
Did they do a
tabulated
further
later.
examination of the signatures?
No, not in this room. The
So
only room that was done was,
you observed no examination of signatures, and they refused to let you do that?
right, I was only allowed to watch these people put these in piles. So when I was ushered back.
So how many ballots do you think, just a rough estimate, how many ballots, 1,000, 100, 2,000?
I would say each box had between 200 and 250 ballots. And I was there for 5 hours. And during that time that I was there, each table went through 6 to 7 to 8, depending on how fast they were and how many mistakes they made. Because many times the ballots were straight and they had to recount them, or I would hear them say.
So how do we do that arithmetic?
All right, well, let's see, 250 times 8, somebody who's not nervous, maybe can say, that's per table, and there were about 16 to 17 tables of 2 people doing this at the same time.
So as I best understand this, there were 2,000 ballots times 17 tables.
Yes,
That you or anyone else
I
that you knew
myself.
got a chance, no Republican got a chance to observe it as far as you know.
well, I was the only observer allowed in at one time. So a gal took over for me at 1 o'clock when I left, and I told her, I'm exhausted. I don't know how you can watch all 17, but stand behind one of the tables, and you'll see that this particular table keeps folding them and tearing them, and once that happens, it has to become a duplicate. And when this becomes a duplicate, it goes to that table, and it goes to the room where we don't get to see what happens to that. So you can't talk to them, but you can do this and tell them, look, that's folded or that's crooked, or, and I said, if you see one again that has a pencil on it, the supervisor is saying that yes, she told me specifically that it could go through. I mean, told me that it couldn't, but told them that it could. So I said, there's some discrepancy in what she's telling me and what she's telling them. So, you know, just do your best to try to keep an eye on this particular table is doing this, that particular table when I buy is doing that. That one over there has a Pima County worker on it, and she works here with them. And there's no Republican at that table, so it's very concerning. And so
It sure is.
so when I was ushered out, they came specifically twice to me and said, please don't talk to anybody, and you cannot leave on your own. Make sure that when it's time, what time you have to leave so we can walk you out. When they walked me out, the gentleman said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, I'm concerned because here they were, you know, my only concern is the handling of the ballots, which makes them ineligible to go through the machine correctly. But it's the room before me and the room after me that's a concern. I don't get to see.
Let me ask you about that. So a certain number of ballots were now put aside as duplicates.
Yes.
Duplicates means that they had a problem.
Yes, that they have to be duplicated.
Right.
So,
It didn't mean there were two ballots.
right, that's what they
Duplicates
call.
can sound like two ballots. What
Right.
it meant was, there's something wrong with it, and therefore we have to duplicate.
Yes, and that's the room that I was originally
And they were put aside.
put aside.
They
to
were
them.
brought into another room, and you were not allowed to go in.
No, I was not allowed to go back there.
So you were cut off from that also.
Yes, I was specifically
You were cut off from
taken out.
observing the problem ballots.
Yes, I was specifically taken out of that room, ushered out, and brought into this room, which really was just room as explained.
And how many could you estimate that is?
Each table would have an average of, I would say maybe 1/16 of the pile, so, you know, let's say an average of maybe 10 to 20 ballots, but by the time I left, these bins were filled. They would fill them, they would go correct them, or whatever it is that they did, and brought them back.
Best estimate.
I would say my guess would be close to, in the day that I was there, just 5 hours, maybe 2,000 ballots.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had a sense that when there was problems with ballots or whether someone should vote or not, the choices that were being made would allow people that appeared to be voting for Biden and the Democrats to vote, and declining those who appeared to be people who might be voting for Trump or the Republicans.
Well, yes, I began to get that sense after I saw that people from other states who weren't even registered in the state of Arizona were being allowed to vote. I was given direction that I had to give them a provisional ballot, because as they walked out, there was a gentleman out there who told me he was specifically there to make sure that every voter who wanted to vote could vote. And so that was on election day, though, Mr. Giuliani. That's not on the observant, the day I was, okay. And on that day, that happening. And then when I would get a voter who was from another county and had some indication, sometimes they had a shirt that either said Trump on it, or they showed me their voter card and said, they gave me some indication that they were a Trump voter, and I had to call on them like I did for every single person that came in to the recorder's office, and I was told to send them away. And so it was at that point that I started to see that this isn't this can't be right, this can't be right. So I tested this and asked her, and then especially as I
Glad you
said,
recognize that.
yeah, when I said, you all live at this apartment complex, and you all live at this other one, and they said, well, yeah, we have to, we're all coming in to vote, and so I said, well, are you how long have you lived here? Is your other precinct here? Well, I've lived here, I've lived there, and they still were allowed to vote. Many of them were not residents for more than a month. Other people said they were registered in another state, but that they were here. And then, as I said, I think the nail in the coffin for me was when this poor little homeless man, and I speak Spanish, so I spoke to him and said, how are you here? And he said, I was told to come vote, I want to vote. And I said, okay, well, where do you live? And he goes, well, I lived in a shelter downtown. Well, downtown is 15 miles from where I live, so I'm sure that's not his precinct. He should be voting there.
So you thought there were about 2,000 like this, roughly?
I would say easily, just in the 5 hours, there was one specific day, they were going to be counted, they were being collected to be tabulated.
One last question. The gentleman who said he was there to turn Arizona blue.
Yes, that was.
What was he? What was his official position?
He had a sign.
An inspector or something?
No, he was a poll observer that was from California. It was from LA. And on a break, I walked out there and I said hello and just walking, and he said hi. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm a poll observer for the Democratic Party, and I'm here. I said, oh. And he goes, the weather's hot here. It's not as hot as it is at home. And I said, well, where are you from? He said, I'm from California. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm here specifically to help turn this precinct blue, which is one of our problem ones. And I said, oh. And as I said to the panel over here, I don't know why he felt comfortable telling me that, but he said, and I said, you came all the way from LA? He goes, no, actually, I came from another precinct in Maricopa, where it was another one that we were focusing on, and now I'm here.
What was he doing? Was he campaigning? Was he encouraging people to vote for Biden? What activities did he take part in to turn Arizona blue?
Well, as I understood, because I was inside working, his job was to make sure that anybody who was turned away to vote, that he would have people he could call, attorneys in his words. He goes, I have a couple attorneys that I'm connected to right now that if anybody's not allowed to vote, I can make sure that they're represented. And so anybody who was not allowed to vote in that polling place, I was the one that they would be talking to. So of course, that was somewhat directed at me, since I'm the one who would say, no, you can't vote. So I don't know what else he was doing, but he said there was a group of them that were coming in.
They sent him there sometime after you began doing that?
He was there, well, we started at 5 o'clock in the morning, just getting ready. So when I went out for a break, I was maybe around 10 o'clock, and he had been there. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what he had on his shirt, but they were very clear that they had T-shirts, they said, that they matched. Another person came in to take over for him, and it was a yellow shirt with something written on the front.
Well, thank you very much for your service and for your courage to testify. I just make one point, Mr. Chairman. Her testimony alone, and I see no reason why she isn't telling the truth. By the way, she is under oath. She submitted an affidavit under penalties of perjury to what she just testified to.
Thank you, sir.
I meant 34,000 votes unobserved change the nature of the election. Just our testimony. One of those.
Sir, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Members, I know everybody wants to ask a question. Well, everybody has one. It is now 12:15. I expect this hearing, at the rate that we're going, we will be here until late into the night. Please be brief with your question, and I would appreciate it if there's no follow-ups, just so that we can have a lunch break, and kind of set the expectation for the folks who are here and get back at it.
And we'll try to make the witnesses focus a little bit.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leo Biasucci, I'm sorry, Representative Biasucci, you're first, and Mr. Burrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question about the voters that you said were coming in that were from out of town, or they just moved there, whatever their reasoning was. Did they have an Arizona ID with an address or anything to show you? Were they on the voter rolls, or were these?
They were not on the voter rolls. They had out-of-state driver's licenses, but had either an electric bill or not, or some kind of a bill that they showed me on their phone, showed me that they lived in this particular precinct. With that, I would call the recorder's office.
And you would verify through them that they were indeed legal to vote?
Right, and so then when I said, well, when did you move here? Well, I moved here on such and such a date, but you had to have registered, I think, in Arizona by the 15th, and then it was extended to the 22nd or the 23rd. So it was just, that they were still allowed to vote, but I had a long-time voter who wasn't allowed to vote from another precinct, and yet someone could vote from another state.
Thank you.
Senator Rowan.
Thank you, ma'am. When the votes that needed to be duplicated, the votes that need to be corrected, when they went to the end of the room, did you notice anybody in there that was actually overseeing that correction, a Republican or a Democrat?
No, as I mentioned before, that's the first room I went into, and he explained to me that this is the room where that would happen, but that, I'm not allowed to be in.
When you were in there, were they sent you somewhere else?
Yes.
Did you see a Republican and a Democrat?
No, he was alone, it was just one person.
You know how he was registered? You know if he's a registered Republican or Democrat?
I don't know, but I have an idea, but that wouldn't be.
Bottom line.
We appreciate no speculation. Thank you very much.
It's a violation of the law anyway, because you're supposed to have both.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, members, one question, and then we're going to break for lunch. Representative Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a really quick question. We had